to discussion. Director Brenner.
I appreciate the report. I appreciate the caveats that the planning department has placed on it, and I'm glad to see that. I mean, the relative density of the area remains consistent with the proposed changes. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Director Gizmo?
Maybe I'm confused. My understanding was that with this subdivision, one of the lots will have, I believe, what is it, 3 dwellings? Does that fit with the density provisions in the official community plan? Because I thought it wasn't. Maybe I'm just confused.
Yes, that's a great question for Ms. Rod.
Thank you, Chair. The existing development is not consistent with the official community plan density policy. And the proposed subdivision is not proposing any additional development. It's just dividing the one parcel into 2 parcels. There's no additional dwellings that are being proposed.
Director Gizmo, go ahead.
So after the subdivision, one of the parcels will not be consistent with the official community plan density policies. Is that correct?
Ms. Rodden?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Roberts
Ms.
on
Roberts.
that question.
Thank you.
I believe there's a table in the report.
Yeah, I've been looking for it.
Page 62 of 105.
Hi. I'm sorry.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you through the chair. Yes, I believe proposed lot A would have 3 dwelling units. Sorry, I'm just looking at the report again. I believe this would be inconsistent with the recommended density under the OCP. However, we did show that the dwelling units per hectare doesn't really change.
And for directors, if you're looking at the other agenda, 9 of 22 shows the 2 proposed lots there on our agenda. Because when did that answer your question?
Yes, it answers the question.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I recall from last month's planning committee meeting, we passed a motion for a different subdivision application, but we included an additional provision, and that additional provision was that the property owner successfully apply for an official community plan amendment to allow for the higher recommended density. That was an item that came before us September. That's how the planning committee went, and I would be very much in favor of doing the same route so that we're consistent between all the property owners that come in and make applications for subdivisions where you know, the density that's of dwelling units that's on the property results in something that's inconsistent with the OCP. Because I hear concerns in my area where, you know, someone might have a 40-acre lot, they put all their dwelling units into one little corner, and then they want to subdivide off just that section, and that would result in inconsistencies with the OCP. And I think that, you know, for our committee to be seen as fair and consistent, I would actually request an extra point to be added. So I would actually move an amendment. I've submitted it to the corporate officer to add it as a additional requirement of the subdivision application.
Give our corporate officer a chance to
Thank you.
Consider that.
Thank you, if I may.
Yes.
Through the chair. What provided in writing, was that where was it going to be inserted or added?
It could be added as either the first bullet point or the last bullet point, where it says subject to the following conditions.
Okay, we'll have a second to get that cleaned up. Directors, would you like that on the screen so we're clear and for folks watching? Give you a second. Okay, we should be seeing that shortly. So just clarity, there's 4 points in the recommendation, and this would be a 5th point, as per Director Gisborne's explanation.
Appreciated.
Great.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a seconder. I'm gonna second that. Discussion on the amendment. Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I do not see this as a necessary step or caveat, as the 4 dwellings on the property are already in existence. And the subdivision, as I mentioned, is not changing the density on the property overall. So I see this as just more expense and hassle for the property owners, and it's not like we're trying to prevent the development of further properties. They already exist. So I don't see a point going forward with it.
Hey, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I recognize the concern or the points raised by Director Brander, but I see this application as having some of the exact same situations as the application that we had 2 months ago in September. Those dwellings were already in existence and we put the same restriction on it. So when property owners start looking to do subdivisions, I think that we do need to be consistent and be fair, because if we start saying, well, this property will do it and that property we won't, and then that makes things unclear, and then that can cause further division in the community. And I think that if we're not going to pass this motion with this provision, then maybe we should actually request reconsideration of the motion that we passed back in September and change that one. Otherwise, we're kind of giving mixed messages. Both of those, today's application and the one from September, the dwellings were already constructed. And they weren't asking for additional dwellings, but we put that provision on in September. And if memory serves correctly, I do believe, was that motion unanimous when we passed it? Yes, it was. There was none opposed. So that's why I'm requesting the same treatment. Fair is fair.
A friendly question from Director Elliott.
Thank you. There. So, coming from rural areas myself, it sounds to me like if you want to put increased density that's outside of the official community plan on your lot, you should probably build it first and then subdivide later. And so I think it would be a great idea to put this provision in there, because then they may not be increasing density, but they're increasing their ability to sell lots separately without correcting the official community plan to match what they have. So asking for an amendment to the official community plan would be better governance if you're going to go ahead and subdivide lots. Otherwise, it appears as though we would be promoting the idea of build first and ask for forgiveness later, and without any due process to do so. So I believe good governance would be better served by this amendment. I don't get a vote at this level, but that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you. And I'll add myself, actually, go ahead, Director McCormick.
Well, I just have a quick question. Thank you, Chair. And that is there any difference between the application from September that Director Gisborne is referring to and the one before us today? Is there anything that would require that we treat it differently?
Good question. Ms. Rodden, you answer that, or?
Through the chair, I do not have the agenda for September in front of me. However, I think the context is different. Generally, when people are subdividing, they're wanting to create a vacant lot for development. And in this case, there's no vacant lot being created, and there's no development. There's no further development potential on either of the lots. They're just separating the interests. We also don't know, because we don't issue building permits, we don't know when those homes were built. They very well could predate the existing official community plan, and parcel changes changed since then, because that was, 30 years ago. So the context matters, to the recommendations that staff make. But I'm sorry, I don't have the example that Director Gisborne is referring to in front of me.
Thank you for your answer, Director Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. So just to be clear, that almost answered the question I was going to ask, but there is no possibility of greater benefit to the landowner owner who is making this application. Then do I understand that correctly? They will not be able to benefit whether they were required to, by development, obviously, whatever that might be, whether they were required to put in an application for an OCP amendment or not.
I suppose that's a question to our staff. I would say some would argue the benefit has already been realized, but Mr. Rodden, do you have any?
Further, like into the future.
Is there any benefit
Get the principle.
in doing this in the future for the owners? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding Director Southcott's question clearly.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's I thought you answered the question that I was going to ask, but I'm not 100% sure that what your answer to Councillor Elliott was the answer to my question. My question is, I'm definitely in favor of consistency, particularly in requirements of people, but I'm also in favor of not making things more complicated. So in a case where the context, as you call it, Ms. Rodden, is history. From your last answer, it's my impression that the landowner is not going to have opportunity to benefit by not being required to do OCP amendment application, and in which case I wouldn't see that to be useful. Is that true?
Ms. Rodden.
Yes, I believe that is true. Currently, I mean, the property is designated suburban residential, and that's the highest density land use designation available to the regional district. We don't have a higher density designation than that. And I just draw your attention back to that table on page 62 of 105, the existing and the proposed density. So the last column, dwelling units per hectare. So the current parcel has 3.77 dwellings per hectare. And proposed lot A will have 3.72 and proposed lot B will have 3.97. So there's a negligible difference there, and there's no new development proposed, and there's no development potential further. So the only benefit is, I think the person is wanting to separate a legal interest to proposed lot B that has one dwelling. But there's no further development potential.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead, Director Brandon, round two.
Thanks. Just to bring everybody up to date, back in September, when we were dealing with that other subdivision, the original recommendation in the package was that the property owner apply for an official community plan amendment to allow for smaller parcel size and higher recommended density. The motion that was actually made was made by me, and I removed that caveat from there because of the circumstances. That failed. It was put back in, the motion passed. In this case, we're not asking for a higher density. There's not going to be any changes any additional accommodations added to the property. It's simply splitting the property, and I don't see the point of making it more challenging and more complicated than it actually is. I see them as slightly different.
I have a question for staff. I'm gonna add myself into the group here. What is the cost of this process for most applications? Is there a general cost? It's run?
What is the cost of an OCP amendment application?
Yes, for the home.
$1,000 is the application fee. And then the applicant bears the cost of the sign on the property. And in this case, I think they have all the supporting documents that would be required because they have them for the subdivision application.
Thank you for that. I saw your hand there, Guzman.
Yes, thank you. This is really interesting, what I'm hearing around the table. So in September, we put an extra provision to say you got to apply for an OCP amendment in order to get your subdivision because one of the parcels will be inconsistent with the OCP. The other parcels that would be created had no dwellings on them at all. Nothing had been built. But we put that provision on because one of the parcels after subdivision would be inconsistent with the OCP. Now we've got an application where they've got more dwellings than what's allowed in the OCP. They've already built all the dwellings. And what I'm starting to hear around the table is, well, that's okay. We're not going to ask you to apply for an OCP amendment. What that signals to the residents is to say, hey, if you want to subdivide your property, build as many dwellings as you can on it, and then apply for a subdivision. I think that really sends the wrong message where the other applicant said like, hey, we haven't built a whole bunch of dwellings on it. We would like to subdivide, and we're going to end up with some lots that are vacant and people can build on it. And I'm thinking back to September where maybe that property owner should have built a bunch of extra houses on it and then asked for a subdivision because it seems like we're becoming more in favor of supporting this subdivision application. And something else that was brought up, which is that suburban residential is the maximum density allowed in our region. Well, I'm not 100% up to speed on the Area C official community plan. I know quite a bit about Area B's official community plan, so I brought up Area C's. Area C has a designation for higher density than suburban residential, and that's the multifamily residential designation. It exists in Area B. Sometimes folks have to make the application to go from suburban residential to multifamily residential. So if we put this provision in there, the property owner could do an application to go to multifamily residential because they're inconsistent with the OCP. Now, that being said, I've spoken at length on this, that I'm not a big fan of how we do density in our OCP. I would really like to see it changed. I think that this property, because they don't have a lot of big structures on it, would most likely fit with my definition of density. However, there hasn't been any direction given to our staff to change those policies. So this is what we got to work with. So in order to be consistent, I think we should support this amendment because otherwise the signal we're giving to our residents is absolutely build first, ask for permission later, and then we would be more likely to actually approve the subdivisions, which I think really sends the wrong message in our community.
Thank you. And I'm just going to add my support for the for this motion as well. Basically, Director Elliott and Director Gisborne stole my thunder and my notes. Really, this is what we see sometimes in areas where it's built first, ask permission later, is my notes. And really, you know, consistency is everything. And I don't want to burden, you know, homeowners unnecessarily, but again, I don't think it's unnecessarily in this case. So I'm in support of the motion. Thank you. Any other, Director Elliott?
Oh, I think one of the things I heard that was there is no designation that would match what is happening on this particular parcel. Multifamily is kind of a little bit different in that it's like for apartment buildings where you have multifamily within a same building, not multiple buildings on a property. So So it sounds to me like, what Ms. Rodden was saying is that in order to do an official community plan request for amendment, they don't know what they would amend it to in order to make it appropriately zoned or whatever. So that's a bit of a trick. But the economic benefit to the landowner is absolutely in having the legal interests separated so you can sell them and gain money from that. So putting houses on your land so your daughter can live there, your son can live there, your grandchild, but it's all one parcel is a completely different animal than subdividing it off and selling them separately with the and separating the legal interests makes each parcel more valuable when you do that, whether they were built before or after. So I would argue there very much is economic gain to doing it this way. And if you want to maybe discourage the idea that people can make a lot of money by building first and asking questions later, there should be a process to bring things in line appropriately for a governance, from a governance perspective. So that was what I was speaking to originally, and I'm still speaking to now. But this idea that there's no economic gain thing would be completely not true. And having lived in rural areas for a long time, this mode of thinking is very common. Exists in my family, many people I know, and who can blame them? I mean, doing things the least expensive way to get to your goal is probably a really good way to do things, and I support that. But from a government perspective, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to come into compliance, keep as little red tape as you can, but at the same time not promote the idea of skirting the law, right? I'm concerned about that. So if there is nothing that this could be changed to in order to make it consistent with the official community plan, maybe the amendment needs to be to create a new designation that fits what's going on here. And that could be part of the process. Either that or you're looking at some other kind of action to bring it into compliance. But I don't know what those actions might be. I just was concerned what I was hearing.
Thank you for your comments, adding to the discussion. I see Director McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I go back to the question that I asked earlier. And my understanding from Ms. Rodden's comments is that this proposal is consistent with the official community plan because of the chart on page 62 and the number of dwellings per hectare would fit. So I guess my question is it consistent with the official community plan or isn't it? Because if it isn't, then I can see the reason for this amendment. But if it is, then it sounds more like a make-work project. So that's my question. Is it consistent or not?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Director McCormick. It is clear from the report and our discussions that it is not consistent currently. And that's what the added part to the motion is to require that amendment.
I wonder if I could ask Ms. Rodden for a comment.
Comment or a question? You have a question for Ms. Rodden?
Yeah, I guess my question is, can you explain whether or not this proposal, because of the number of dwellings per hectare, fitting pretty much with the OCP, why it's inconsistent with the official community plan?
Ms. Rodden.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we made that point clear in the report that the use is consistent with the OCP. The density is not consistent with the OCP. However, the existing density is not consistent with the OCP either. And it's a marginal difference in the density between what's existing and what's proposed on the two lots.
That answer your question, Director McCormick?
Thank you.
All right, we've had a couple of rounds. We're going to move on to the vote here on the amendment. Thank you, Court Officer. And I think we all understand the amendment. Do we need anybody want it broadcast again? I think we understand. All those in favor of the amendment? You don't get to vote, Director. Yeah, sorry. So in favor, all those opposed. Oh, sorry.
Director McCormick was in favor.
I didn't see your hand. I apologize. That's 3 in favor. Any opposed? 1 opposed. Director Brander. Motion is carried. Now we'll move to the main motion. You have it in front of you there, the 4 points there. I think we moved and seconded that already.
It's already.
Yes, thank you, because that's the way it works. Any discussion, further discussion? See any hands? All those in favor? Any opposed? Sorry, your hand was probably quick.
It was up.
Okay, that was unanimous. That's carried. Thank you. We're moving on to section 9.1, timeline to update Area B official community plan. Director Gisborne.
I'm just wondering if the committee will allow me to speak to this item, or if they will insist that I put this before the.
Sure, let's just have a quick preamble.
Very quick preamble. So the Area B official community plan has been something that's come up for the planning committee, all the way back since I think 2022. Take a look at their Let's Talk Land Use agenda. From when all the folks came in from Savory Island, I noticed that Area B OCP was a notice of motion from Director Gisborne, 2.5 years ago. So, history rhymes, I guess they could say. The reason I'm bringing this up is I think Savory Island and their OCP process has really been a bit of an eye-opener for the community and members of the planning committee around the table. Some of the challenges that Area B faces has to do with our zoning bylaws, Nootka Street, Traff Road, and Myrtle Pond. When it comes to density, a discussion that was brought up is, if you restrict your density based on the dwelling unit, a dwelling unit will consider, a house that's 10,000 square feet to be a dwelling unit, or a 20-foot motorhome would also be considered a dwelling unit. And, members of the community look around and they go, well, those two things aren't the same thing. And that became a greater discussion, especially up on Nootka, around what do we actually want to restrict? And the concept of floor area and lot coverage is something that has been added to other communities' official community plans. And this is an item that was being discussed, I believe, in either June or July. And the idea was, let's do an amendment for Area B's OCP. And I believe it was Director McCormick that said that changing these housing policies really should occur when, an official community plan is going through a whole rewrite. Well, I do believe that we can do it as an amendment in order to get support from around the table and hopefully from Director McCormick. I would like to see us moving forward on the Area B official community plan, but seeing some of the pushback going on Savory, my question is, what is the timeline? And maybe we can actually expand that timeline out so that the committee can get formed maybe a little bit earlier before the survey goes out, because sometimes the public thinks that we're moving a little too quick on some things. So this motion is, what is the timeline, and what's our long-term plan?
Yeah, and thank you for your preamble, but I think that looking at what is on our agenda, we might as well move into that discussion because we're already in it. So maybe I'll accept a motion to discuss, and I will second it. So now we can have everyone participate. We've heard the preamble. Any other directors want to first round here? Does Director McCormick?
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered what the timeline is for staff, because I know you do, they review the OCPs in a sequence, and I'm just wondering when the Area B OCP would come up.
And I think that's really what we're the heart of the matter here, and we're already underway with a lot of work. So Ms. Rodden, what are your thoughts on the timeline?
Thank you. Through the chair, staff are already looking ahead to the sequence of OCP review and updates, and in the draft budget coming forward for 2025 to 2029, we have slope and flood hazard study update and groundwater study for Area B and C in 2026, and OCP review and update starting in 2027 and going into 2028. And staff are thinking of tying together Area B and C like it was in the past when it was a southern region official community plan, rather than having two separate. There's a lot of efficiencies in resources if we do that. And it is a trend in other areas that you group your OCPs and have one rather than splitting them up.
Okay. That gives
Thank you.
us, thank you for that. Any other questions, Director Gisborne?
Oh, thank you for that. So we're looking at potentially 2027 to 2028, with a potential slope and hazard study, as well as a water study as well. Those studies, as I understand, haven't been done, nor have they been approved by our board. That does leave me some concern because we are in the middle of a housing crunch, and the planning committee has declined updating our housing policies for the Area B official community plan. I do understand that multiple other regional districts are doing what are called harmonized official community plans, which is where they take all the electoral areas and just make one big official community plan. That does have some benefits, but it also does come with some risks associated with individual neighborhoods and individual electoral areas feeling like their uniqueness doesn't get fully understood and grasped. Area B is the electoral area that borders the city limits. We do have significant development pressures. There's significant concerns related to our housing policies and the official community plan. We currently have inconsistencies between the zoning bylaws and the official community plan. And my residents keep asking me, what are we going to do to address this housing issue? And what always comes up from our, our housing sessions that we, go off on our conventions about is, pre-zoning and really looking into our housing policies. And that's what I'd like to get addressed. I think 2027 is 3 years away before we even start on it. And I think the members of the public would be very unhappy that we continue to not change those policies. So that's where I'm hoping for something a little bit more aggressive. When it comes to slope and hazard study, we already did a slope and hazard study for Area B and Area C, and we updated our official community plan for those studies. So I'm just not entirely sure, but really what I'm banging the drum on here is how do we update our housing policies? And I'm wondering if there's any ideas around the table, because at the end of the day, it's this planning committee and this board that sets the direction for what's going on in our community, with people suffering out there.
Well, I appreciate your comments. I think what's in front of us is the original question, what was the timeline? We've got an answer. It might not be to everybody's liking. I think, well, we're living the moment with the Savory Island OCP and learning a lot from that. And I would think that will help to educate us moving forward how to be more efficient and timely and better at the process. Any other directors have their hand up for comment? Questions? Director Gisborne, go ahead.
I'd also just like to make one request to the other members of our planning committee. Earlier on in this meeting, which was Wednesday, a motion was put forward to try and update the Nootka Street zoning bylaw to be consistent with our official community plan. According to our procedure bylaw, I do believe it's only Director McCormick and Director Brander that can bring that back for reconsideration. I think there was some desire that maybe we could postpone it. However, that motion ended up being defeated. And unless that gets brought forward for reconsideration, it will remain defeated. So if either of those two directors would like to bring that forward, then we can actually deal with some of these housing issues and inconsistencies. Otherwise, it just sits there.
So while they ponder that, I'll ask the corporate officer for procedurally, is that true? How motion that's been defeated is brought back? Can you educate me at least?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When was the motion considered? I'm sorry,
Or November 6th?
Earlier in this meeting last Wednesday.
Oh, yeah. So
Sorry,
I thought that we were talking about the same meeting. So reconsideration.
I'll let you check. we want to get the right answer, so I'll give you a sec for that.
After a vote has been taken on any question except for one of tabling or postponing a subject, a member, except the chair who voted in the majority on the matter, may move to reconsider the motion at the same or the next regular or special meeting.
Is this considered the same meeting?
This is the same meeting.
Okay, so today or the next meeting. Thank you for that. So are those two directors prepared for anything at this time? Because it looks like you get another chance at our next meeting. You have a question?
It was about the procedure.
Go
I
ahead.
think Director Fall was absent at our meeting last time too. That's why it was defeated. No?
Leave that blank.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Director Electoral Area E participates in planning through Islands Trust.
Ah,
Not here.
okay.
Yeah, but good question for those watching. Area E is not on this committee.
Okay. So last thing. Here. So if that's the timeline, I do believe it's up to the planning committee to determine if we want to do anything different. And I just want to let the planning committee know that as I do get phone calls and concerns from my residents, I will simply hand on the contact information of the other planning committee members, and they can call the other directors and maybe put some pressure on them. Because there's only one vote.
Yeah, that'll let them know the process. Anything for me? But you're signaling me.
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. Question period. Do we have media or? I guess we voted on discussing.
Yeah, we voted on it, I think.
Well, he made a motion.
no.
And the answer is, yeah, you don't.
I will say,
An odd one.
you've already discussed the timeline, so I mean, you can vote on it.
I
if you want.
apologize for that.
Yeah, like you say, you got a mover and a seconder.
And then we moved right in.
Yeah, so,
No call for the vote yet.
yeah, you could call the vote.
All right, just to be official, we should call for the vote since we were discussing. All those in favor of discussing it. I see looking for Director McCormick. She's probably confused. Yes.
Yeah, could I see the recommendation that we're voting on, please?
Yes, it was just the discussion of the timeline to update the Area B official community plan. It's a bit of a different recommendation. It was just to have this discussion. And then my bad, we moved right into the discussion.
Okay.
Just a formality. Are you prepared to vote yay or nay? Just for the official vote.
Yeah.
Good. Unanimous. Thank you. Thanks, CAO. I didn't hear any questions though, or
Hello, Chair Galinsky from the Peak here.
go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. My question relates to when the meeting was occurring on Wednesday and there was an unregistered delegation from Savory Island. And my recollection is that there was a bunch of correspondence from Savory Islanders that didn't get on this agenda. My question, Chair, is when will those letters be presented and when will and how will they be available?
Right. Well, you're quite correct. I addressed that in my discussion under correspondence. There was our procedural timeline with 10 days. Many of those didn't make the timeline, so they will be included in next planning committee's correspondence and being tracked by the project team.
I thank the Chair for that response. That was my question for today.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any. They're here. No proposed in-camera session, closed session. We are adjourned. Thank you.